Hello, welcome to Know About History Channel. Hope you like it.
The gray, heaving swells of the English Channel on the morning of June 4, 1944, bore witness to one of the most agonizing decisions in military history, a decision that rested not merely on the grand strategy of generals or the political will of nations, but on the fragile, granular data harvested by the unsung mechanisms of intelligence. While the postponement of Operation Overlord from June 5 to June 6 is universally attributed to the meteorological forecast delivered by Group Captain James Stagg, the intricate tapestry of events that made that delay possible, and necessary, is woven with the silver nitrate of aerial reconnaissance film. To understand the gravity of the moment when Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower uttered the provisional order to halt the Armada, one must look beyond the map room at Southwick House and into the cockpits of the unarmed Spitfires and P-38 Lightnings of the Allied photographic reconnaissance units, whose shutters clicked open the eyes of the invasion force. The narrative of the delay is inextricably linked to the visual confirmation of the Atlantic Wall's lethality. For months prior to the invasion, the German defenses under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel had undergone a frantic, concrete metamorphosis. Rommel, distinct in his belief that the invasion had to be stopped at the water's edge, had accelerated the construction of beach obstacles designed to tear the bottoms out of landing craft and obliterate infantry before they could reach the shingle. The intelligence regarding these obstacles was not divined through spies or signals interception alone. It was captured on celluloid. The crucial nature of this photographic intelligence reached a fever pitch in the final days of May and early June, where the validation of tidal data and obstacle density became the primary variable for H-hour. The single roll of film in this historical analysis serves as both a literal and metaphorical pivot point. It represents the specific, low-level, dicing 40s flown by pilots who risked freezing sea spray and quadruple-barreled flak to capture the oblique angles of the Normandy beaches. These images, developed in the frantic darkrooms of RAF Medmenham and analyzed by the weary eyes of stereoscopic interpreters, revealed a terrifying reality. The German obstacles were not merely passive barriers but were tipped with tellermans and arranged in overlapping belts that could only be navigated at specific tidal intervals. This visual data forced the Allied planners to lock the invasion window into a rigorous set of constraints. They needed a rising tide to allow the demolition teams to work, but a tide low enough to expose the obstacles. This requirement narrowed the available dates in any given month to a scant 3 days. When June 4 arrived, the machinery of the invasion was already grinding into motion. Convoys were at sea. The tens of thousands of men were sealed in their marshalling camps. The atmosphere at Southwick House, the forward headquarters of the Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAAF, was thick with cigarette smoke and nervous energy. The weather charts, produced by Stagg and his team, were themselves a form of graphical intelligence, a visual representation of the chaotic atmospheric violence churning over the Atlantic. However, the decision to delay was not just about the inability to fly or sail, it was about the inability to see. The entire Overlord plan relied on the precise application of aerial and naval bombardment, both of which required visual confirmation of targets, confirmation that was denied by the low cloud ceiling and driving rain. The interplay between the film brought back by reconnaissance and the weather maps created a deadlock. If the invasion proceeded on June 5 as originally planned, the cloud cover would have blinded the bombers. Without the aerial preparation, the photographic intelligence showed that the Atlantic Wall defenses, the pillboxes, the enfilading gun positions, and the resistance nests identified on millions of feet of film, would remain intact to slaughter the assault waves. The film had done its job by identifying the targets. Now, the weather was preventing the execution of their destruction. The delay was an acknowledgement that the intelligence gathering was useless if the operational conditions didn't allow the exploitation of that intelligence. Consider the specific mechanics of the dicing missions that informed this tension. Unlike high-altitude vertical photography, which provided the mapmakers with cartographic data, dicing involved flying at mere feet above the waves, the camera looking out sideways to capture the view a soldier would have from a landing craft. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, these films revealed that Rommel had installed Element C, massive steel gates reinforced with waterproof mines, and the Rommel's asparagus, wooden logs tipped with explosives. A specific sortie, analyzed late in the planning stages, confirmed that the density of these obstacles had increased significantly in the intertidal zone of Omaha and Utah beaches. This specific intelligence, captured on rolls of film that were rushed across the channel to intelligence centers, dictated that a high-tide landing was suicidal. The landing craft would strike the submerged mines before reaching the shore. This realization, cemented by photographic evidence, meant that Eisenhower had to be at low tide. This rigid tactical requirement clashed violently with the meteorological reality of June 4. The storm that was battering the channel was not just creating rough seas that would capsize the flat-bottomed Higgins boats. It was creating a surge that messed with the tidal predictions derived from years of hydrographic surveys and aerial monitoring. The roll of film that mapped the obstacles essentially trapped Eisenhower. He could not order a landing in a storm because the visibility was zero, but he could not simply wait out the storm indefinitely because the tidal window, the window required to navigate the obstacles seen on the film, would close for another 2 weeks. The drama inside the library of Southwick House on the evening of June 4 is often dramatized, but the analytical underpinnings are frequently overlooked. Eisenhower sat surrounded by his lieutenants, Montgomery, commanding the ground forces, Ramsey, commanding the naval forces, and Lee Mallory, commanding the air forces. Stagg entered with his weather map, a document of doom predicting gale force winds and low cloud. The silence that followed was the silence of men weighing the lives of 150,000 soldiers against the probability of disaster. If they went on June 5, the aerial reconnaissance had proven the defenses were too strong to breach without accurate bombardment. If they delayed, they risked the secret leaking or the weather worsening. The delay of 24 hours was a gamble that the weather front would move fast enough to leave a small window of clear skies, a break that Stagg predicted would occur on June 6. This prediction was tenuous, based on limited data from weather ships in the Atlantic. But the decision to pause the invasion was fundamentally a decision to respect the reality of the German defenses as revealed by photographic intelligence. They needed that visual clearance. The fleets that had already sortied were recalled, struggling back through the tempestuous seas. Men who had been seasick for hours were told they had to wait another day in the swaying purgatory of the transport ships. During this 24-hour delay, the machinery of intelligence did not sleep. The Allied Central Interpretation Unit, ACIU, at RAF Medmenham continued to pore over the latest available reconnaissance. Every hour that passed was a chance for the Germans to move a division, to lay a new minefield, or to shift a battery of 88mm guns. The single roll of film metaphor extends to the constant updating of the enemy order of battle. The greatest fear of the Allied planners was the movement of the German panzer divisions. Aerial reconnaissance was the only way to track them. If the panzers moved towards the coast during the delay, the invasion might be crushed. Thus, even while the fleet held station, the PR Spitfires were waiting for any gap in the clouds to dash over Normandy and ensure the 21st Panzer Division or the Panzer Lehr had not shifted positions. The tension of the delay brings into sharp relief the limitations of technology in 1944. There were no satellites, no real-time drones. There was only the pilot, the plane, and the camera. The delay meant that for 24 hours, the Allies were effectively blind regarding any last-minute German movements because the same weather that stopped the invasion stopped the reconnaissance flights. The commanders were freezing the intelligence picture in time, praying that the photograph of the battlefield taken on June 3 would still be accurate on June 6. This anxiety was palpable. The detailed maps distributed to the troops, maps created from the mosaic stitching of thousands of reconnaissance photos, were the soldiers' only guide. If the Germans used the cover of the storm to alter the beach geography, to blow up sea walls or flood the hinterland, those maps would become death warrants. When the order to go was finally given for June 6, okay, let's go, it was authorized because Stagg promised a window of visibility that would allow the visual confirmation required to neutralize the threats identified on the film. The bombers needed to see the targets. The naval gunners needed to spot the fall of shot. The coxswains of the landing craft needed to see the landmarks identified in their briefing packets, packets containing grainy black and white photos of the shoreline. The delay was the homage paid to the necessity of sight in modern warfare. Furthermore, the specific film aspect is highlighted by the story of the disastrous lack of low-level reconnaissance over Omaha Beach immediately prior to the jump-off. While the defenses were mapped, the specific location of the veteran German 352nd Infantry Division was not fully appreciated in the immediate tactical sense on the morning of the invasion due to the lack of fresh, clear photography in the final 48 hours caused by the weather. The delay highlighted the perishability of intelligence. The single roll of film that wasn't taken or couldn't be taken during the storm of June 4–5 contributed to the shock at Omaha. The intelligence picture was static, but the enemy was dynamic. The logistic magnitude of the delay, driven by these intelligence and weather factors, was staggering. 175,000 men, 50,000 vehicles, and 5,000 ships had to be put on hold. The risk of detection increased exponentially. The German radar stations along the coast, though heavily bombed, were still sweeping the horizon. The longer the Armada loitered in the assembly areas, the higher the chance that a Luftwaffe patrol or a Kriegsmarine E-boat would spot them. The film intelligence regarding the location of German radar sites had been used to blind the enemy, but the blindfold would not last forever. As the hours of June 5 ticked by, the weather cleared just as Stagg had predicted. The skies opened up enough for the air power to operate. The decision to delay had been vindicated. The single roll of film concept here morphs into the operational reality of the invasion day itself. The gun camera footage from the fighters and the bomb-aiming films from the B-17s and Lancasters on the morning of June 6 serve as the historical receipt for the delay. They show the breaks in the cloud, the heavy swell of the sea, and the violent unleashing of the ordnance that would have been impossible on June 5. The analysis of this event also requires looking at the German perspective, which was equally driven by a lack of intelligence, specifically, a lack of aerial reconnaissance. The Luftwaffe had been decimated to the point where they could not fly regular reconnaissance sorties over the English ports. They were blind. Rommel and Rundstedt relied on weather reports that said an invasion was impossible. They did not have the roll of film showing the invasion fleet gathering. The irony is profound. The Allies delayed because they had too much data and needed the perfect conditions to exploit it. The Germans relaxed because they had no data and assumed the conditions prohibited action. Rommel went home to celebrate his wife's birthday, confident that the storm was his shield. In the aftermath, the delay of D-Day is often smoothed over in history books as a minor hiccup in an inevitable victory. But detailed analysis reveals it was the point of maximum danger. Had Eisenhower pushed ahead on June 5, the roll of film detailing the underwater obstacles would have become a catalogue of tragedy. The landing craft would have arrived at the wrong tidal moment or been smashed by the storm surge onto the mines. The bombers would have dropped their payloads inland or into the sea to avoid hitting friendly troops through the overcast, leaving the Atlantic wall intact. The carefully curated intelligence, gathered at the cost of many pilots' lives, would have been wasted. The legacy of this moment is the supreme value of patience in command, dictated by the rigidity of hard facts. The hard facts were the gradients of the beach, the tensile strength of the steel obstacles, and the barometric pressure of the North Atlantic. These were not variables that could be wished away with morale or speeches. They were physical realities captured on film and paper. The delay was the acknowledgement that even the greatest armada in history could not fight physics and geography simultaneously. To analyze the specific granular details of the beach defenses that necessitated such precision, one must look at the work of the topographic sections. Using the films brought back by the recce pilots, they built scale models of the beaches. They knew that at high tide, the Belgian gates were submerged. They knew that the hedgehogs were invisible. The invasion plan was a script written to navigate a set of props that had been photographed from 30,000 feet and from 50 feet. The delay was the stage manager holding the curtain because the lighting wasn't right. The narrative of June 4, 1944, is a testament to the integration of intelligence into command. It wasn't just about knowing where the enemy was, it was about knowing the environment. The single roll of film is the symbol of the known variable. The weather was the unknown variable. The friction between the two created the delay. When the invasion finally launched, it carried with it the ghostly presence of the cancelled day. A timeline where the Allies might have failed, a timeline averted by the courage to wait. The history of the 20th century turned on the axis of that 24-hour pause. It was a pause bought by the meteorologists, but paid for by the pilots who had mapped the coastlines so thoroughly that the commanders knew exactly what they were waiting for. They were waiting for the moment when the reality of the beach matched the intelligence on the film. And when that moment came, the liberation of Europe began. The single roll of film didn't just delay D-Day, it defined it. It ensured that when the boots finally hit the sand, they had a fighting chance. The delay was not a hesitation, it was a calibration. Ultimately, the analysis of the D-Day delay through the lens of photographic intelligence reveals the transition of warfare from a contest of brute force to a contest of information. The side that could see better, and the side that had the discipline to act only when the vision was clear, was the side that won. The German blindness versus the Allied sight. The storm obscured the sight, so the war waited for the storm to pass. The film remained in the canister, a latent image of the destruction to come, waiting for the light.